when ambition quietly changed its shape. Ambition doesn't always disappear. Sometimes it transforms so slowly that we don't notice it happening. What once drove us forward begins to pull us in a different direction, and the goals we chased for years start to feel strangely incomplete. This story begins at the moment one person realized their ambition hadn't faded. It had evolved. For most of their career, ambition was clear and loud. It meant advancement, recognition, momentum. It meant saying yes to opportunity and proving their capability at every turn. That definition worked for a long time. But today, as work becomes more personal and values shift faster than titles, many people face the same question they did. What happens when ambition no longer looks the way it used to? From the outside, everything appeared aligned. They were progressing, trusted, and positioned for more. People spoke about their future with certainty. They were seen as someone going places. Yet internally, a subtle change had begun. The goals that once energized them now felt distant. The hunger to climb gave way to a desire to understand, to contribute, to build something that mattered beyond visibility. At first, they dismissed the feeling. Ambition doesn't change, they told themselves. You just push through, you aim higher, you stay disciplined. But the harder they pushed, the clearer it became. This wasn't resistance. It was redirection. The first sign appeared during a moment that should have felt rewarding. Praise arrived. Recognition followed. Yet instead of satisfaction, they felt a quiet emptiness. Not disappointment, just a realization that the reward no longer matched the effort. Something inside them had shifted, and their ambition was pointing somewhere new. That realization marked the beginning of an internal reckoning, one where they would have to redefine what success meant, not based on momentum or expectation, but on alignment with who they were becoming. And once ambition changes shape, there's no going back to seeing it the same way again. The shift became impossible to ignore. Each new achievement felt smaller than the last, not because it lacked importance, but because it no longer answered the deeper questions they were beginning to ask. What was this all for? Who was this version of success actually serving? The answers grew harder to find with every step forward. They noticed how often their work revolved around performance rather than purpose, around metrics rather than meaning, around appearing successful rather than feeling fulfilled. The realization unsettled them because they had built their identity around ambition. To question it felt like question themselves. The conflict deepened as opportunities continued to arrive. Offers that would have thrilled them years earlier now landed without excitement. Each new path promised more of the same: more visibility, more pressure, more distance from the work that once inspired them. Saying no felt wrong. Saying yes felt dishonest. They were trapped between expectation and evolution. This tension followed them into moments of reflection. Late nights, quiet weekends, long walks where the noise finally faded. In those moments, they began to see the pattern clearly. Their ambition hadn't disappeared. It had matured. It no longer chased validation. It sought impact. It wanted depth, not display. The realization brought relief and fear in equal measure. Relief, because they weren't broken or unmotivated. Fear, because honoring this new shape of ambition would require change. It would require letting go of goals that once defined them and stepping toward ones that felt less visible but far more meaningful. The breaking point came during a conversation with someone they admired. As they spoke honestly about their doubts, the response surprised them. They weren't told to push harder or aim higher. They were asked a single question: what kind of work would still matter to you if no one was watching? That question cut through everything. It stripped ambition down to its core and forced them to confront a truth they could no longer avoid. The path they were on wasn't wrong, but it was no longer theirs. And once they saw that, the conflict shifted from confusion to clarity. Clarity did not bring immediate peace. It brought responsibility. Once they understood their ambition had changed, they could no longer pretend the old goals still fit. Every day spent chasing them felt like a quiet act of self-denial. Yet, releasing those goals meant stepping away from an identity they had worn for years. The internal conflict intensified. Part of them feared being misunderstood. Ambition had always been a defining trait, the proof of drive, discipline, and worth. Letting it change felt like risking that narrative. What would people think if they slowed down? If they chose depth over visibility? If they stopped chasing the next obvious milestone? At the same time, the pull towards something more meaningful grew stronger. They noticed how energized they felt when working on projects that created real impact, even if no one praised them. They felt more alive in moments of mentorship, creation, and thoughtful problem-solving than in moments of public recognition. These experiences revealed a truth they could no longer ignore. Their ambition now wanted contribution, not applause. The tension peaked during a planning session for the future. Goals were laid out clearly. Targets, timelines, metrics designed to push them further along the familiar path. As they listened, a sense of disconnection washed over them. They could execute the plan perfectly. They knew that, but the thought of doing so felt empty. It would lead to success that no longer meant success to them. That moment crystallized everything. They weren't afraid of hard work. They were afraid of spending their energy on something that no longer mattered. The ambition that once pushed them upward was now asking them to move inward, to build something lasting, intentional, and true. This realization carried weight, because once ambition changes shape, every decision becomes a test, a choice between honoring who you were or committing to who you are becoming. And with each passing day, it became clear that ignoring this evolution would cost them far more than embracing it ever could. They chose to listen to the quieter ambition, the one that asked for meaning instead of recognition. It wasn't an easy decision. Letting go of visible milestones felt like stepping off a familiar map. But for the first time in a long while, the direction they chose felt honest. The shift didn't happen overnight. It began with small changes, turning down opportunities that no longer aligned, saying yes to work that felt purposeful, even if it lacked status, redirecting energy toward projects that created value rather than visibility. Each choice reinforced the same truth. Ambition wasn't gone, it had simply evolved. Over time, something remarkable happened. Their work became more intentional. Their motivation deepened. The pressure to perform eased, replaced by a commitment to contribute. They found satisfaction not in climbing higher, but in building something that mattered. And that fulfillment carried a steadiness they had never experienced before. What surprised them most was how success followed in a different form. Not louder, not faster, but stronger. Their impact grew. Their influence widened. People sought their insight not because of a title, but because of the clarity they brought. Ambition, reshaped by purpose, became a quieter but far more powerful force. Looking back, they realized the change hadn't weakened them. It had refined them. The version of ambition they once chased was necessary. It brought them here, but the version they now embrace would carry them forward with integrity, depth, and intention. And that is the hidden truth about ambition. It doesn't disappear when it changes shape. It matures. It aligns. It teaches us that success isn't always about rising higher. It's about moving closer to what truly matters. Sometimes the smallest shift in perspective becomes the beginning of a new future. When